Welcome, Charlotte. I'm really excited to have you back again. If people are looking at any of my videos on the Out of the Woods YouTube page, I, Christy Wood Giles, and Charlotte Tomlinson have chatted before because of her children's book, which really has inspiring messages woven throughout it. And I encourage people to look into that. And we will talk about that a little bit at the
It's
end.
good to hold it up.
Perfect. Skakoon. Charlotte, before we get it, because we're actually going to talk about a bit of your other aspects in your life that motivate you, but can you just guide people on where to find you, where to find the book, and then they'll also want to find you for more reasons after we talk today, just so we don't lose sight of doing that before we're done talking.
Sure. I mean, it's very easy because it's my name.com. So it's charlottetomlinson.com. And if anybody's interested in the children's book, it's just /Skakoon. Skakoon spelt like that. And everything else, all my musical work is just it's all very self-explanatory. And the best way to get my book is on Amazon.
Awesome.
So we'll put the link down below, I think.
Okay. And that's now, I know you're in the UK. That's Amazon's.com.
Yes, it's everywhere because it's print on demand. So you can do Amazon.com. I'll put the link for that.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now let's get into the good stuff that we wanted to talk to you about today. And can you just give us, because we're going to talk about your performance coaching, but can you give us a little bit of background of your musical background so that we understand where that coaching comes from?
Yeah, sure. I am a classical pianist, and for my whole career, I've up until about 10 years ago, where I sort of changed a little bit, I've been a performing pianist, and also I've been teaching the piano. So those two things have gone in side by side. And it was about 10 years ago when I was getting a little bit sort of restless with the music profession that I started thinking, okay, I'm teaching the piano, but I'm actually sort of doing more in my piano teaching than I am actually sorry, losing my train of thought, than in my piano teaching than people expect. So what am I doing that's extra? What am I doing that's sort of different? I'm not just teaching notes, style, interpretation, and all the things people need to know about playing the piano. I'm sort of offering extra things. I'm offering the sort of psychological side, the emotional side, the physical side, because one of the things that fits into my background is that I have done about 15 years worth of bodywork courses of all sorts of different types. So, and I didn't know why I was doing this. This is alongside being a professional musician and playing and teaching. And I constantly go on different weekend courses or week-long courses. And what that gave me, I didn't end up being a massage therapist. I didn't really want to be. But what it gave me was an understanding about how the body works, the muscles, where we hold our tension. So what I discovered that I could do was see musicians in particular, because that's my area, see how any musician was standing, sitting, holding themselves when they were playing and where they were holding their tension. And I could also relate it to the sound they were making. So I kind of have that. I found that I had that to offer. So that, as well as sort of, supporting people with performance issues, was how I sort of started thinking, I think I'm offering something more than just straight piano teaching. And so the next thing I did, it looks as if I'm just promoting books at the moment, but I'm just going to show you the book that I wrote 10 years ago, which is called Music from the Inside Out. So I wrote that because that was a way of pulling together everything that was in my head and putting it down on paper and clarifying it. It sort of ended up being a kind of handbook for musicians, really, very easy to read, lots of practical things in it. So I suppose that was really how it all sort of happened. And I suppose if I am also to talk about my background, I would say that when I was much younger, when I was a student at music college and at university, I know, well, music college particularly, because these London music colleges are really tough, as a lot of the big conservatories can be very, very harsh places. And I saw that there was a kind of ethos that was high standards at all costs.
Mm,
And generally, the cost was to the person. So
mhm,
the cost was you work hard regardless of how it makes you feel. You have to, it's sort the men out from the boys. It's kind of, be prepared to be bullied and bashed and all of those things. And it was absolutely horrible. And I thought, this isn't right. There's something so wrong with this. So that was and I remember thinking, I am never going to teach in the way that I've been taught by the so-called best people at the so-called best conservatories. And I thought, no, there's something seriously wrong. And then as I went through my professional life as a pianist and as a teacher, I started realizing that everything all pulled together. That fear of being bullied and being bullied is sort of abusive behavior that happens it's not just in the musical world,
mhm,
it's in pretty much every world.
mhm.
But that this was happening, and that what was happening as a result of it was that people were getting nervous and getting anxious and being very frightened of actually and unable to do their best on stage. So all of that sort of went into a great big melting pot and made me think, I've got to do something about this. I've got to say something. And then the next stage, about 7 years ago, I actually did a whole interview series, which at the moment is not yet up on my website, but will be within a month or two, called Beyond Stage Fright, where I actually interviewed top professional musicians, international musicians, about how they manage their performance stress. And it was fascinating. So that then got me on the map, because people Google stage fright and I come up quite regularly. And so I started getting connected, particularly with performance anxiety, and realized that musicians are desperate to be helped with performance anxiety. So
Yeah.
that was really a bit of a background for what I'm doing.
Well, and there's so many points I want to touch on there. I hope not to lose them all because I think, first off, I want to say that I think what intrigued me to talk to you about this more was my background, obviously, is health and fitness and, all those things. But I feel the same issue exists. And
Mm,
maybe even with, because you're really trying to achieve something, right? You're trying to work towards something. And I think there's a point where we just all hit that we're just not really sure we can do it, or we would have done it before, or, keep moving ahead and accomplishing more. And then there's sort of this point that really holds us back, or something happens and it holds us back. And so I see it happening in so many facets, especially people simply trying to either accomplish their dreams or improve their life or make good life changes. And then I think with what we've gone through the last 3 years is people are experiencing this, I will call it performance anxiety. That's almost really a social anxiety,
yeah.
but it comes with the things that they used to do naturally, then took some time and didn't do them, and then there's this, inner fear. And so I'm seeing it in people no matter what they're doing. And I guess I find it intriguing that I always think of, the arts world, the creative world, as you wouldn't have trouble with this because you're so inspired, because you love what you do, and there's so much creativity with it, that I think we
Mm,
might have this assumption that they just
mm,
go out there, free spirited, and and obviously that's not the case. And I know that the pressure is immense, that is on them, especially performing anything is
mm,
immense. But I think then we also make the other assumption we make is that these people are such professionals that have done this for so long and do it so well that things are thought down to the detail, that you can't imagine. And people even say this to me sometimes when I'm doing public speaking events. Oh, that comes so easily to you. And I've just never got to that point where no, that I don't, I walk out there and it's considered easy. It really is. And I sometimes think, and I'm sure you found this too, some just sometimes triggers us and we can be doing okay with it, and then all of a sudden we take some steps backwards and it's just not in us to do it naturally. So anyway, all to say, I find this so intriguing, and I believe that if the arts and music are not your thing, there's still so much to learn in what you're coaching. And so I'm wondering, can you go through a little bit of, what you do, what you find with these clients, that give us sort of a bit of a background feel for.
Sure. I just wanted to pick up on one point before I do that, though. And you were talking about people being very professional. I just wanted to add in there, because this happens in the musical world. Top orchestral performance look very professional, are very professional, but they can be suffering in order to do that. And when I work with them, they can be incredible and amazing. But when I work with them, and I'll talk about that in a minute, they can free up and it becomes even better. So you don't, in other words, you don't know until you have the comparison. If you didn't have the after coaching, you just had the before, you would think they were amazing, as I do. And then you have the after and think, oh my God, it's even better. It's freer. It's more expansive.
Wow.
So
Awesome.
that's fascinating. But yes, I mean, there's so many different things. It's difficult to sort of put it all into one thing. I mean, when I'm working with somebody, I would say the first thing I do is I'm a detective. I mean, they tell me what their issues are, and I will pick up from what they say, and they'll very often they'll drop clues and they'll say what happened to them with a teacher, or like, for example, I was working with somebody from Eastern Europe sort of fairly recently, and she said something like, and she's quite elderly, and she said something like, "Oh yes, well, when I was younger, I mean, I had this, I had the ruler on the knuckles." And I went, "Oh my God!" And she was so terrified of her lessons when she was a child. She used to hide in the bushes before she went in. I mean, and then you think, well, of course, if anybody has to deal with that, that's a form of trauma. It's abuse. It's all these things that we don't think about. So anyway, what do I do? Detective work, find out what's happening. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's emotional, psychological, sometimes it's musical, sometimes it's a mix of all of them. So it could be that somebody is incredibly anxious and their anxiety is held in their shoulders, or if they play the flute in their mouth, or it shows in some physical way. So I'll be working on the physical, helping them to sort of let go in different ways physically. For example, if pianists are really funny. We tend not to breathe when we play. It's hilarious. So it's a sort of, everybody holds their breath. So the first thing I do is get them breathing, and they're just sort of shocked, because the breath, as we all know, is essential and powerful. And if you get somebody breathing when they're playing, I mean, everything gets rocked about. They make mistakes, all sorts of things happen, but they just go, oh, I didn't realize it could. Oh, I feel better. Oh, this is really weird. And I'm constantly talking to them as they're playing, saying, keep breathing, keep breathing. And sometimes they go, because there's so much tension, they don't know how to breathe normal. They just don't know what to do. And then some of them say, oh, should I count for three? And I said, no. Should I breathe where the phrases are in the music? No, just exercise your lungs, just get them working, so you just free up and don't worry about mistakes. And then bit by bit, that is staggeringly powerful. It's extraordinary. I mean, it's so simple. And that's what I'll do in public masterclasses. I will get musicians to breathe when they're playing, and the audience just goes, oh my God, that's so different. So that's one thing. That's an example of a physical thing that I do. Then emotionally and psychologically, it's all sorts of things like I talk about the inner critic, the entity that precedes the inner critic is the bully. So what I learned in my own sort of education experience is when you're bullied, it can go inwards and it becomes the inner critic. So the inner critic is judgmental and emotional because the bully is judgmental and emotional. So you take it and that's what you become. So when you're practicing a musical instrument, you're saying, I'm really bad, I can't do it, this is terrible, I'll make loads of mistakes. When what they really need to do is, oh, I made a slip up there. Why did I do that? Oh, I think I need a better fingering. Very pragmatic, very objective, very calm, and loads more information. So that's one of the things I really work with people on, is to get them to shift, and that has to be in the practice time, into the objective, what I call the objective rather than the inner critic, so that they can shift into that way of being. And if they build that up in their practice and in their work, because all of us, if we're playing an instrument or whatever we're doing, whether it's sport or anything, we have to critique our own performance, but we don't want to do it emotionally and judgmentally. We want to do it pragmatically with, observation. So that they have to learn that, and that can take a long time, depending on the person, how old they are, how embedded it is, how willing they are to learn. But so that's not a quick fix, but to see it is quite an insight for people sometimes. So, but if you go out onto the stage with a strong inner critic, you're projecting it onto the audience and you're saying, I think I'm really bad, therefore you think I'm really bad, and I'm now terrified. And so that's one thing. So it's teaching people, it's helping people find emotional safety on the stage. That's what I'm really doing. It's emotional safety, and the inner critic is the one that throws that completely. So if they can learn to feel comfortable on the stage, and also, the other thing I wanted to say on that, and in that same area, is that if it's all about them, it's horrendous. So people on the stage, if they're playing just one or two people, they just think it's all about me. Everyone's going to think I'm bad. Oh my God, the spotlight's on me, 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 me. But if I can turn it around and say, what are you giving them? What are you sharing with these people? They're human beings. They're wonderful human beings. What are you sharing with them? So that those are probably the key things. And I just wanted to add in, because you were talking about public speaking, and pre-2020, I was doing this pretty much every week. I was public speaking different places, and I'd give my presentation on managing nerves. And one of the things that I would say to people is that I don't actually have nerves when I present, when I talk. But there's a reason for that. And the reason is that, well, I've done my preparation. That's another thing I talk to them about. But the reason is that I see the audience as being my friends. So I see them as being, oh, I could have a cup of tea with you. I could have a cup of coffee with you. I could have a drink with you. I see them as just humanity. I am a human being. You're a human being. We connect. I'm chatting to you as if you're my mate, my friend. And that makes all the difference. And I try to encourage musicians to see the audience as their friends. Now, the sort of young people, the teenagers and the students, their audiences very often are, are sort of terrifying, sort of generally. But if you're a professional, it's not so much the audience, that's easy. It's working with your colleagues. It's working in the orchestra with your colleagues, with your colleague next to you, hearing that you've done something bad. So it's different according to different situations, obviously.
It is.
But it's feeling emotionally safe.
I've said some presentations I've done with my friends, I almost turned it into something more dramatic and found it harder than speaking to people I barely knew. So it's funny what we get in our head.
Yeah,
It's interesting
that's
that
right.
you talk about the inner critic, because I speak on that a lot in health and fitness. I refer to it as self-talk, and I talk about how, we there's a lot of knowledge and information about bullies around us, but there's not very
Yes,
much talk about the one inside us who is actually
yes,
far crueler than most of the
absolutely.
ones around us. And I also believe that exactly what you said. It's tough work to try and deal with that, because that person's been there talking to us for a very long time, so
Mm,
much so that we don't really even realize that it's not helpful, or that it may not even be true in a lot of cases what
mm,
we're
yeah.
saying. And that, recognizing it is a monumental first step towards, starting to work with it. But it's interesting because, especially when people are trying to improve their nutrition or their fitness, and whenever there's sort of a point where they, kind of give it all up, we can always trace it back to, there was a point that changed where the inner critic really came on strong. And it's always interesting because, it really was that point where they kind of gave it all up regardless of what progress they had made. And I always say, your body's actually trying to protect you, because when that inner critic becomes so mean, it doesn't want you to go and listen to that person anymore. So it actually pulls you away from the things that are good for you, because your inner critic has come out so intensely. So
Yeah.
I love the way you explain all of it. It's interesting how it really, we have it in almost anything we're trying to do. And I don't think we recognize that it's really gets to this
Mm,
strong point where it can literally stop us from doing what we love to do or want to do. So it's pretty powerful. The other thing you were
mm,
talking about with breathing, literally anybody I know who works out stops breathing at some point, and you're like, it's the one thing we need to keep doing to keep doing this exercise. um and we talk a lot about how, we're also stressed, even if we're not trying to challenge ourselves or work on something. And it's the one thing that tells our body we're safe, that can instantly
yeah.
decrease the stress. So it
Mm,
is, you're right, it's literally the most basic, most profound thing we have to start focusing on doing. There was a study they did once where they had people working in an office environment and someone bringing them files. So the files were piling and piling, and they counted. And I can't remember, I think the person hadn't even taken a breath in 6 minutes or something like that. And it was just such a calm, seated, typical situation for them to be there at that desk. And yet they weren't even taking in an actual breath
no,
to deal with the stressful situation. So I don't think we recognize when, every
no.
day we're not breathing. So I love all those points. I mean, you touch on so many more, and I don't mean to interrupt. So please keep
No,
going.
no, no. I was just sort of saying that one of the things that I encourage people to do, is to out their inner critic, and that whenever they see the inner critic, instead of feeling miserable about it, oh God, I've just seen my inner critic, it's like hooray, So I get them to say hooray when they've outed their inner critic.
Nice. I love it.
Now, now we can change. Now we can do something. So it's like notice every single time and then consciously change. I think that's really important.
That's
And
brilliant.
and yes, and going back to breathing, I mean, I get people to have, and I'm sure you do the same thing, a pre-performance routine, which can be very flexible and very changeable, where there and a lot of that has to do with grounding, rooting themselves to the ground, and long, slow, deep breaths. Because as you say, that's what gets us out of fight, flight. And for musicians, it's mostly freeze, fight, flight, freeze. It gets us out of that and into, yes, we're safe, it's okay, everything's okay, we're going to be okay. And I think my role is helping people clear all the stuff out of the way that gets in their way of them performing at their best.
Mhm.
So you've got all of these different things. You've got the inner critic, you've got the physical practical things. There's all preparation is absolutely key. If you don't prepare, then you're really in a tricky situation, because that will really flag up the nerves. And yeah, I mean, it's what was I going to say? I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I'll just take the chance then to touch on what
Yes.
you were talking about, because I just had this revelation before you and I got on the video. When I started doing videos, it was very not natural to me. And so
Mm,
I did start to develop this routine only because it was a necessity to try and get my nerves down. And I realized today, just before I was hopping on with you, that I actually do it now, not to get my nerves down, but it just gets me in a great place
yes.
to do this. And it just, I think more than anything, it makes me very present. Like I'm clear headed, I'm excited and looking forward. I mean, it's you. I love chatting with you. So that makes it easy too. But I realized I found myself doing this routine without kind of thinking about it.
Fantastic.
It hit me a couple of years ago. I really had to do this just to try and even be able to breathe to do these types of things. So, and it's funny, as I was thinking through that, I realized there's a lot of people I encourage that I coach to almost come up with one of those to start their day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's really just, it's kind of, yeah, it's taking all the tools that help you, yes, get centered and grounded, which I think is very important, but brings you into presence and connects with yourself. And I think it's also, I used to say when I got very sick that it was because I didn't do that, that people could convince me I wasn't sick, because I just didn't take that, even a minute or two each day to connect with myself to say, how are you doing?
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, it's a really a great living tool that I think we can use almost for every situation. But definitely the ones that make us very nervous and anxious, it's a necessity for sure.
And I think that what's really interesting is that I have to teach musicians. Musicians will learn the notes, learn the music, deal with the technical stuff. But what they don't understand generally, and I have to teach them, is they have to practice all these things. They have to practice moving on from the inner critic. They have to practice breathing when they're playing so that that becomes comfortable. They have the various things I will encourage people to do, which is usually very simple. So before they go on stage, they'll be breathing, they'll be grounding. Some people want to have silence, some people want to talk. They have to find out their own things, do what they need to do. They need to gather themselves and focus. When they then walk on the stage, it's a case of how you walk, how you feel, and breathing and smiling and getting the endorphins going. And then when you sit at the piano or whatever anybody's doing, different instruments doing different things in different situations, I encourage them to take a long, slow, deep breath after they've done all the things. Let's say it's a pianist playing and they have to adjust the stool and they're adjusting their music or whatever they need to do. After they've done all of that, then to take one long, slow, deep breath and then play. So they're doing it on the stage. And that's really important, but it needs to be practiced. And people don't practice performing enough, in my personal opinion. So that's the sort of routine bit, but there's also practicing performing. People will go from their practice room where they've learned a piece of music and they think, oh, that's okay. And then they go into an audition or a performance or a whatever it is and go, that didn't work. But what they need to do is learn what it feels like to perform. So they have to do that in advance and they have to feel it. I get them to visualize the venue or go into the venue if they can, or just imagine that they're playing in front of 3 or 4 people if they don't have anybody to play in front of, so that those nerves start kicking in and they go, oh, right, that's what it feels like. Okay, am I ready? Am I ready for this?
It's kind of like all the possible triggers,
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah,
preparing.
then that's right, and then reminding themselves of the things they do when they have those triggers.
Mm.
So when people have got all of these things, they've got a toolkit, they've prepared, they've worked through their inner critic, they're feeling much more pragmatic. Then it's a case of getting in the zone, which is very, very jargony, but it's basically you're not, I was trying to explain this to somebody the other day. When you're performing, and I'm sure this is the same in your work as well, you're not thinking mentally, intellectually. That goes on one side because it becomes physical. I mean, in your world, it is predominantly physical. In my world, it's physical and emotional, expressive, or whatever you want to call that. So it's kind of both those things have to take over. So your mind has to just go and have a little rest. It's very light, it's very aware of what's going on. It can jump in if necessary, but it needs to let, the hands in my case, or whatever, do what they need to do and let go and express. And it's the nearest, I talk to people about this a lot. It's like meditation. Performance and meditation are very similar. So I'm not really, so people tend to think meditation is, stopping the chatter and stopping, just being thoughtless. That's extremely hard. But one way of meditating is to focus on one thing. So you can take a flower and you can look at the petals and how it's what color it is and what it smells like, and you really zone in and focus. And that is the kind of meditation that is performance. So you're really focusing. It's an intense sensory focus, which isn't mental and intellectual. Because if you're thinking, oh my God, I've got the difficult bit coming up. Oh, I wonder whether I can do it. Oh dear. Oh, no. Oh, my left hand is doing something. All of that chatter is useless because it just gets in the way. You want to have a general sense where you are, what you're doing, and then you let go and you trust the other part of you that you've trained so well to just do it. And that, when you can get into that space and then let go, you have your chance of really getting into that wonderful, happy sort of, what would you call it? I mean, apart from the zone, I can't think of any words for it, but you know what I mean, that space. And when we get into that space, the audience gets it. They just go, oh God, I can feel it. They don't even know it consciously sometimes, but they feel it, they know it. And that's when it's just electric. It's sort of, we're going into different dimensions when we're going into that realm, really. And that's what I want people to do, to remember that they're human beings with incredible ability. And not just that, they're divine human beings with incredible ability, who, with the right conditions, when they can really sort this stuff out, they can let themselves go there. It doesn't have to be random. It doesn't have to be, it's happening to me. Oh, I'm very lucky. It can be, I've really worked on this. I'm giving myself the best possible environment. Wow, here I am. I'm in that very amazing place where I'm really communicating from my heart and soul, and it's all very special.
I love all the words you use to describe it, and I'm trying to, if I'm to use some of the words I use, you can tell me if you think I'm kind of describing the same thing. Because I often say to people, you have to, one, you have to prepare for what you do know so that you can handle what you don't know, that thing you don't anticipate, that trigger that might be new, and then that allows you to, and like you said, you prepare all these things so that you can let those go, because you really want to go deep within yourself, almost like your instincts take over, what you so naturally do so well. Now that, yes, the brain shut off, you can sort of allow what's sort of deeply rooted in you to come out and almost take over in a different way. But you're really operating not only by instinct, but very much by feel then. And I think I always describe it as that's where we allow our inspiration to come up.
Absolutely.
So when we
Yeah.
can operate by feel, and when it's a positive feeling, because there definitely can be negative ones too, but you elevate the energy in your body so that it's inspiration, coming up. I tell people even motivation isn't even as powerful as
No.
inspiration, because motivation's coming kind of from what you were talking about at the beginning, coming from negative reinforcement or something you're trying to fix or change, or I'm doing this wrong. So you motivate yourself. But
Mm.
inspiration comes from that place where, we've taken such good care of ourselves and supported ourselves and prepared. And now that what's so lovingly deep inside of us can come up and be presented.
Exactly.
And I'm sure that's what you're saying when you say the audience can feel it.
Oh God, yes, and also because we're all connected, and that's one way of reminding ourselves. But I just want to say, I'm sure you know this anyway, but the breakdown of the word inspiration, it's spiro is breathe.
Mm,
At least I think I'm pretty certain it's about breathing, or maybe it's spirit, or maybe I've got that wrong. I'm pretty certain it's about breath, because it's and also since I'm on that track, enthusiasm is about God within,
mm.
N-K-O. So Teo meaning God, N within. So these words are very, very lovely when we sort of, understand them.
Yes, because even inspire, right, is inspiration.
Yes,
You're taking
yes.
air in. So yeah, I actually hadn't thought of it like that before. I
So
love
it just shows the importance of breath, and how, and for musicians, I'm not talking about the woodwind brass players, the singers who have to breathe anyway. And in fact, when I talk to them and work with them, it's about shallow breathing. So they do shallow breathing when they're nervous. So we have to teach them or get them to exhale really fully in order that they can inhale fully. That's the key with people who use their breath to make a sound, and also to get their bodies very, very sort of grounded and settled. And in fact, I once worked with an oboe player in an orchestra in Sweden. And I don't know how he had the courage to get up on stage and have in this masterclass with me in front of his colleagues and let me sort of comment about his playing. He was an amazing player. So he played stunningly beautifully. And I just thought, what am I going to do? But I could see that his shoulders were really tight because the woodwind players they can't move a huge amount. Everything's here and down here. So this tends to hold a lot of tension because you have to get everything else free, and your breath and your lungs have to be free. So I put my hands on his shoulders and I said, now I want you to play, and I'm just going to talk as you play. And I want you to see, don't worry if it all goes wrong. That's quite hard if you're a principal player in a huge, big national orchestra, in front of your colleagues. But he was very game. And I said, I'm just going to say easy, let it be easy, let go of your shoulders and help you let go of your shoulders. So I want you to put your focus on this and not on the playing. So he did that. And he was extraordinary because he was able to let go of his shoulders. And it doesn't always happen like that. He was able to let go physically of the tension in his shoulders as he played. And what was so fascinating was I asked him how it was for him, and he said, I feel as if my lung capacity has increased. So for an oboe player, because the instrument, the oboe, needs a huge amount of lung capacity, and it's a difficult instrument for a lot of reasons. And I said to his colleagues and friends, what did you notice? And they said, it was absolutely beautiful. It was, and this is what I was saying right at the beginning, you don't think it can be any better, but it can be.
Mhm.
When that human being, this is what my work is about. It's getting the human being happy, comfortable, free, so they can do what they do best and express and communicate. When the human being is all uptight and upset, it doesn't matter what you do. If you can learn style and interpretation and notes and this, that, and the other till you're blue in the face, but it's not going to help because you're going to be all sort of locked up.
It's true. And when people talk about blocked energy in the body, they think it's such a woo woo term. But when that
Oh,
tightness is there, the nervous
yeah,
system isn't sending signals down. Obviously, blood and oxygen isn't getting down. And that's where all those reflexes and physical abilities would come. So it would only make sense that not only is the blood and oxygen going to the lungs
yeah,
easier, but that it's actually just flowing through the whole body. So it's, more relaxed knowing that, your body goes into stress knowing it's not getting oxygen to certain areas. So yeah, you could just see almost everything would relax from
yes.
that one simple aspect. That's
And
and
yeah, go on, carry on.
No, I was just, if you want to mention
Oh,
something on that.
nothing. I was just going to say, and it was so fascinating to me that a woodwind player's lung capacity expanded from something so simple.
Yes. Yeah. But then, yeah. Oh, I love it. And then the other point I was going to touch on that you mentioned was, unfortunately, we feel that, we've thought it all through, or that we would know what to look for or what to change. But the truth is, when we sometimes do these things for so long, we don't acknowledge that it might not be in the best way to serve us or help us or support us. And so it really does sometimes take an outside view
Yeah.
who knows what to look for to help guide you. Because yeah, I think just naturally we think we've all tried everything and have done everything, but the truth is there's always more to, and mostly to make it easier on us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. There's so much that can be done. And I sort of, I'm baffled by how much this work is needed in my world. It's so needed. I kind of wish I could be all things to all people, but I can't.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yes, there was another thing I wanted to add to the in the zone thing, which is another way of saying that is that you're going into gamma brain waves, because that's, uh, is that I've done these little mini experiments with musicians, and I've got them to spend 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes, or a minute and 30 seconds. I time it on my phone, and I say, now what I want you to do is imagine something or someone or an animal or a beautiful view that makes you feel really happy, that really lifts you. So it could be beautiful walk, or just imagining the trees on an autumn day, or a lovely breeze, but you have to hold that for quite a long time, just nearly 2 minutes. And so the point of the exercise is you lift yourself, you endorphinate yourself, and you start cultivating that act of endorphinating yourself. And you do it and you hold it. So you don't just say, oh, that's nice, and then think of something else. You hold it for nearly 2 minutes. And I've done that before I've got somebody to play, then I've got them to do that exercise, and then I've got them to do it again and play again. And the playing's completely different.
That's awesome, because it's, I often speak on the health benefits of nature, as you know, and people will often say to me, when I go out into nature, I feel better, I'm more relaxed. And I always say, your mind and body send signals back and forth, and visual images are one of the most powerful tools to send those signals back and forth. So if you imagine that natural place that makes you feel that way, it will instantly send the same signals that make you feel relaxed out there, because you have sent that message,
Yes,
I want to feel
yes,
like that.
yes.
And so it is amazing, because I think we think, oh, we have to go out there, and I just say, anytime you
Mm,
felt good, take that imagery back in your head,
yeah,
and your body will instantly take you there.
exactly,
So it's so
exactly.
powerful. And people talk about visualization, and I'm sure you have it in your field, where people visualize, a beautiful performance and it all going well. But I'm like, we can take visualization to a whole new level and just say, I want to feel this way. Let's
It's
imagine the
feeling.
rest.
It's actually more, it's not so, visualization gives the impression it's looking and seeing, but actually it's feeling. That's the thing that you want to do. You want to feel what you want to feel. So, I actually did this once. I did this exercise of getting people, of timing people. I did it. Can't believe I did it. I did it in front of 100 people in a music college in Manchester, the Royal Northern College of Music, and there were 100 people listening to the presentation and the masterclass, and I had the one guy on the stage who just played, and I said, okay, I'm going to get you to do this exercise. Why don't you all do it? I got everybody to do it,
Oh, wow.
because there's no point in getting one isolated person to do it on the stage. So it was an amazing feeling. You get 100 people in a room, and you've got this silence, and they're all feeling good feelings. It amazing. And then this guy played, and of course it was different, and they could see it and feel it themselves and see what a difference it made. And that's what we all want. And there are all these routes. There's the clearing out of the way. There's what I do very often, which is the sharing, when I get people to imagine they're giving a Christmas present to different people in the audience. I get these kids, sometimes if they're teenagers or music college or university, and I'll just say, okay, you're giving a present to each one of these people. Just look at this front row. Present for you, Christmas present for you, Christmas present for you. I get them to really feel into it. So, and they laugh because it's kind of a bit, they feel a bit self-conscious. It's a bit silly. And I said, that's what you're doing when you're playing. You're communicating, you're giving. We're giving who we are. We're giving our talent. We're sharing our talent. We're sharing music. We're sharing what's really profoundly important to us. And when we do that, it's mind-blowing. It's, we feel it.
Wow, that's actually really profound. I'm imagining myself doing that when I'm speaking, and really you are so right. You're up there sharing with them a gift that you've been able to develop, and so it should feel and look like that. But I never heard that before or even imagined that. So that's pretty amazing. That's
What, the Christmas present or the sharing? Or both?
both. Um, so do you talk at all about, because I think from some of my experience, you could almost, I could manage and control when I had to do the presentation, but it sort of would feel like I would fall apart after. Everybody
Okay.
saw this presence of a confident person and they thought it was no big deal and that I could do that. But yeah, then, sometimes it'd be shortly after, sometimes it would sort of be the next day. Do you have musicians that speak of that?
Um, yes, and they have different things. I do talk about what to do after a performance, and it depends on the person and what their experience is. If they're very, I'm working with some very what's the word, I mean, young musicians sort of in their 20s and 30s who are sort of really shooting up to mega stardom in the musical world. And then it's a case of practical things like how to manage off. You've got interviewers, you've got media, you've got sponsors, you've got is how to manage all of that. And I had to say to one person, no, don't practice at midnight when you get back to your hotel room, when you've just done a big don't. No, that's not allowed. You've got to switch off. But I mean, I would say it's just alerting people to the fact that when you've got adrenaline's buzzing around your system, you're in a heightened state, and that's really important for people to know. And I have to remind myself about this too. And this can happen if I'm doing a weekend course of teaching. Right at the end, I'm in a heightened state. If somebody comes up to me and says, well, you didn't do that very well, you didn't do that very well, I'm absolutely shattered, more so than if we were having a nice discussion about feedback that could come 3 days later. That's totally different, because I'm in a heightened state. So I'm not quite answering your question, but it's sort of going round and about that way. But the falling apart thing, I think it's all part and parcel of heightened state, recognizing you have to come down off the adrenaline. It's like a drug. You've got to, not withdrawal, but kind of, you've got to come down. That can take 2-3 hours. It really can take a long time. So for a musician doing a performance in the evening, they may not be able to sleep until 1 o'clock in the morning, and they've got to know that. So what I did once, this is really quite funny. I had there's a music festival where I live, and I went to a concert where I knew quite a few of the people who were performing, and they didn't know the city that I live in particularly well. And so I said, well, would you like me to take you to this meadow, which is really, really beautiful? It happens to be God, I can't remember what it's called. You can't build on it. Whatever that land is, you can't build on it. It's got horses on it sometimes. It's a floodplain as well, so sometimes it can be flooded. It's very beautiful, and it happened to be full moon. And I sort of took all these musicians up with all their instruments and in a couple of cars, and we put the cars and parked the cars, and then we got out of the car, and it was nighttime. But there was a full moon, and you could just sort of see the shimmering water of this flood meadow and lots of space. And and it's sort of sensory feeling of they were starting to come down off this adrenaline. They were starting to come back into themselves. It was visceral. I could really feel it. So what I encourage people to do is whatever their version of that is. So some people will want to immediately, they're on a high, they want to go and see all their friends and be in the pub if you're in the UK, or, whatever, or go and have some food or whatever they want to do. But the most important thing is that they find, they walk or they breathe or they just come down from the heightened state. And I always, I have, from what I said about me being in a heightened state and being given negative feedback, I always let people know you mustn't ever give negative feedback when somebody's in that heightened state, nor must you allow anybody else to give that to you. So if somebody comes back, and it's happened to me, somebody's come back to the green room in a concert and said, "Oh, I liked what you did here, but I didn't like that, and I didn't like that." And sometimes it's so rude and it's so unnecessary. But I mean, if somebody starts doing, I'm very aware of that. So I will just say, it's great to have your feedback. Can we talk about it next week? Let's talk about feedback next week. We're not always wise enough to be able to do that in the moment, but that's the basic idea. And I always also let people know that they mustn't do it to anybody else, because it's so important. It's like you're really open and you're sensitive and everything sort of, more so than normal. And if that is sort of disrespected in that moment, it can be very damaging for people.
Well, and it can even start to make an association with a heightened state and criticism. So sometimes those are the sort of things that happen that will trigger us. And I love that you've said that, because it's really supporting, or it fits that whole concept that we need to take care of and support ourselves. There's a lot of talk about, we have to be able to take constructive criticism, but your point to, there is a time and place, and when we can better take it in and handle it is very important. I actually had never thought about that fact. And it really, you're building your longevity and resilience to do this longer by saying, it's not a good idea for me to talk about this now. Can you come back to me at a later time?
Exactly. And it's very, very important. It's very important.
So Charlotte, I think we could talk about this forever. I love connecting what we do and learning from you. If you had some advice for people out there that are mostly looking to share their art, their creativity, what they're passionate about, and are struggling with it, what would sort of be your most basic thing you would want to share with them, almost like something they could consider or think about right now before they contact you?
I think we're going to have to get that a little bit more precise, because there's so much. Something to can you help me sort of refine that a little bit more?
So I think the thing is we all have, and you know what, it's almost sometimes what we do, who we are, can almost be the most insecure part of who we are, weirdly, and it's really just not about us necessarily being amazing at it, but we want to share our passion or something we love. But the nervousness or the self-consciousness of sharing it. So, whether it's your recreational musician or your professional musician, but whatever it is that people have a passion for, but unfortunately don't share it because there's a lot of anxiety associated with it. And so maybe it's not about going out onto the concert stage, but they're just not sharing something that I think maybe down the road they wish they could share because they're
Okay.
so passionate.
Okay, I've got a few ideas. I would say, depending on where, there are so many things I can say on this front, but we'll just zone it into one. If you are feeling anxious about playing in front of everybody, that a lot of the anxiety comes from a fear of being judged. A lot of performance anxiety comes from that. So if you're aware of that, what I would actually say is find your audience. So it could be your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your mum, your dad. You want to find somebody at the beginning who's going to say, great, love it. I was going to just join that into what I know, what colleagues of mine know, that whenever you go back to see somebody at the end of a concert, you only say good things. And if you don't like it, you say, I loved this bit, because you're always going to like something. So that's really, really, really important, because you have to build up an emotional resilience to be able to manage sharing things. And if you're sharing something, but you go, oh my God, they're going to criticize me, I'm terrible, oh my God, panic, you're not going to share. So you've got to sort of build your ability to withstand more and more sort of, not difficult situations, but you start with easy. So you get yourself playing as well as you can, and then you play to a really good friend who is only thinking of your best interests, will support you whatever you do. Now, at a certain point, that's not enough. You want to actually play in front of somebody who can critique what you do. That's fine. That's a teacher or a good friend or something. That's fine. But again, remember, you don't want to be critiqued when you're in that vulnerable state.
Right. I love that term, building emotional resilience. And you know what? I think people need to know that we all have something we need to be building that on. We all have this fear of judgment in many
Yeah.
aspects of our life.
Yeah.
But I also think there's a lot more we all have inside of us that it's unfortunate we don't share. And
Yes.
that I think if we think of the concept that you just said, that, yeah, it's, every little step will help. It will build that emotional resilience. The fact that we're nervous doesn't mean we're not meant to share. It just means
No.
we need to do something slowly that supports us in a gentle way to build the
Yeah.
emotional resilience. Because there's just a lot of really awesome, unique people, unique interests that are out in the world that aren't being shared. So I love what you decided to come up with. I'm glad we went into that in more detail because
And I have to just quickly butt in and say, please, can people realize it is nothing to do with your standard. Every human being that I've come across who plays a musical instrument has at some stage or another had performances and has to deal with all of that. They have to manage themselves. So it's nothing to do with whether you can play or you can't play, or you're good or you're not good. It's nothing to do with that.
and it's certainly not a depiction on whether you are meant to share or not, right?
No, and of course, preparation and knowing what you're doing goes hand in hand. If you don't know what you're doing and you're not prepared, you're going to open yourself up to feeling very anxious. But that aside, no, it's wonderful if everybody can share, even if it's just playing to your partner or playing to your dog,
True.
or it doesn't matter. Just share, just share.
I love that. So remind us again, charlottetomlinson
.com.
.com, and your book, Skakoon, your other book that you were talking about, is it available?
That's on Amazon as well. I mean,
Okay.
I'm holding it up just because the image is quite useful to remember.
Awesome.
It's music from the inside out. You have to It's not easy to find on Amazon. I haven't done my marketing very well, so you just have to put that title and my name in. But it's really, I mean, I've had non-musicians, people who don't have anything to do with music, have read it and have got the relevance of it.
I think that's so true with everything you said today. I think it's very relevant with actually most aspects of our lives. So I really appreciate you sharing so much of your knowledge with us, Charlotte. I
Thank you.
hope everybody listens to this, whether they're a musician or not. And I definitely hope that those in the music world contact you, because I think working with you would be such an experience. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Well, it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. It's lovely to share these similarities that we have.
That's awesome. Thanks, Charlotte.